Again, thank you for joining us. I will now turn it over to Anna Clow, co-director of the Tribal Youth Resource Center.
Thank you, Antonia, and we just want to say hello and welcome to all of you who are joining us here today. We are presenting this session as part of the Tribal Youth Resource Center, which is located at the Tribal Law and Policy Institute. We are funded by a cooperative agreement with the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention, and we serve CTAS Purpose Area 8 tribal grantees, which are juvenile healing to wellness courts, and CTAS Purpose Area 9, which are tribal youth program grantees. And within both of these programs, we know that many of you may be addressing truancy prevention or attendance or academic achievement, which is why we are presenting this session today. And we are very honored to have Johanna Farmer with us today. She presented as part of an internal dialogue that we had with OGGDP grantees, but as the training and technical assistance provider, we are also able to provide TTA for all federally recognized tribes. So we're really happy today to have you joining. If you're an OGGDP grantee, feel free to share in the chat box. And if you're not a grantee, we would love to know where you're joining from and if you have a truancy prevention program. I want to share just a little bit about Johanna. If you joined last year to some of our truancy prevention learning series, you may have seen her present on one of those sessions. I'm going to put the session link that Johanna presented on last year in our chat in just a moment. But Johanna Farmer is an enrolled member of the Rosebud Sioux Tribe. She has served as the Etam Yoemia program manager at the Pasco Yaqui Tribe for the last 12 years. The program encompasses work under the Children's Service Program, Tribal Courts Improvement Program, the Tribal Youth Program, and Juvenile Advocacy Programs, and the Office of the Prosecutor. She has worked to strengthen tribal communities and families through tribally driven and culturally relevant service models. She has a Juris Doctorate from the University of Arizona with a certificate in Indigenous Peoples Law and a bachelor's degree and bachelor's degrees from the University of Minnesota in Political Science, Theater Arts, and Native American Studies. So we are really happy to have her back today. She's going to be facilitating this session and facilitating the dialogue. And so I'm going to hand it off to her and hope this is a fruitful session and looking forward to staying connected with all of you following the session. So Johanna, take it away.
Thanks, Anna. Welcome everyone to the Talking Attendance Dialogue. We'd like for it to be a true dialogue, so we want everyone to be able to participate. Some of the ground rules that we just set forward because we want everyone to participate is just allow everyone to have their opportunity to speak, come off mute when you do, and then you can mute your camera when you're not talking. We would appreciate it. If we have a lot of people talking, if you could just put in the chat that you'd like to speak, we can definitely call on people to make sure we're giving everyone an opportunity to speak. If you don't feel like talking, in the chat boxes over there, Anna, myself, and Antonia all monitor the chat box to make sure that we're getting all of this in the chat. How I just wanted to start was what we had kind of talked about during our last dialogue was that, you know, there's a lot of reasons why we're doing the work we're doing. And I think it's important for us to remind ourselves why we are doing the work that we're doing. And so if anyone would like to share why they're doing the work they're doing, share what work they're doing, let's start off the dialogue with that focus in mind. Dale, I see that you'd like to share with the group.
I'm going to use this message.
Dale, did you want to share with the group? You were saying you'd like to speak on your understanding of truancy. We'd love to hear from you.
Did you say me?
Yeah, I thought Dale Green, you said you'd like to speak on your
Yeah. I went to school in the last century to be a teacher, and I ended up being a social worker and working in the legal department, working in the tribal courts, Bauman and Anishinaabe program, which oversaw the witness court, family drug court, juvenile reentry. And as a dean of students, I got the Minnesota Department of Education's training on expulsion, reentry, and everything. And it was at a time when the No Child Left Behind Act was still in place. And when a school started falling behind in grades, student grades, or if they didn't make progress and they were below a threshold, the education system demanded that they come up with an educational plan to address those failing grades. And after a year, 2 or 3 of no improvement, principals and superintendents were fired. So we saw this effort by the school systems to improve grades, whether it was reading, math. And I understand, being a teacher myself, we go into teaching to inspire, to give hope, and something gets kind of lost there when they're put in the inner cities or tribal schools where there's ongoing historical, social, and economic conditions. On the Leech Lake Reservation, that was my employer for over 20 years. In the early 70s, the public school Native students actually walked out of the school because of the educational experience of racism that was going on in that particular school district at that time. And what ended up happening, the reservation was able to start their own school. And I'm only saying this kind of as a little bit to the backstory. I'm a cultural expert witness. I'm a qualified expert witness in ICWA cases and often used in the tribal court as some sort of bringing cultural relevance. The boarding schools, as we all know, we're still feeling the effects of our ancestors' educational experiences, and I don't know if there's a conscious memory that a lot of people have on some of our characteristics today can be directly traced right back to people's boarding school experiences. My father, Dale Green Sr., was taken at 4. My grandfather, about the same age in 1907, and came home in 1924. And I only mention this because they had to get reacculturated with their family, their community, and relearn the language, and even the process of being able to go into the brush, the lakes and streams, and get food. And if they were emotionally abused in those schools, there wasn't the mental health people there available to help them. If they were emotionally and physically abused, there was going to be even more problems. And for a lot of people, men and women, boys and girls, they were sexually abused. Their educational experience, if they survived it, would follow them the rest of their life, and all these issues about if the educational experience outweighs the educational value, and you have children and grandchildren And everybody knows, even boarding school survivors know, we have to educate our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren. The importance of understanding an educational experience will be devalued if a community is struggling in historical, social, and economic conditions where the school, knowing that their students have walked out in an effort, a combined effort, because their educational experience was such that they created their own school. So now, 40, 50 years later, we're sitting here and we're having truancy. I think Leech Lake just had like 100 truancy cases filed. And to me, I don't know if the school are aware that they should be doing something like the No Child Left Behind, trying to figure out the educational experience of these youth isn't beneficial to the educational experience. And so often, instead of sending resources out to help the family, they use the legal system to make the educational experience, I don't want to say criminalized, but once you bring in courts and court orders and probation officers, it becomes that same forced absorption, assimilation education that our grandparents, my grandparents, my dad, he escaped from Pipestone 5 times and kept getting pulled back. So there's some educational experiences there. If we're not able, I would ask that when we're dealing with truancy, we first, as a school administrator, we assume a responsibility to educate. And we're supposed to provide a safe learning environment that everybody can be inspired and hope for a bright future. If that's not happening, and problems, in the home are such, we're going to have truancy. Truancy gives us an opportunity to address historical trauma. And as many of you highly educated people know, trauma isn't historical if it's present today. And that's sort of what truancy is a visible symptom of. And I'm talking fast, but I'm trying to, so I'm not too long-winded. I had the distinct pleasure of being in charge of the Bauman Anishinaabe Care for the People Tribal Court programming, which was the family drug court, the wellness court, juvenile diversion, juvenile reentry programs. And one instance, child welfare had asked, I went out with a social worker that one of our communities had a family that children were truant. So I and the social worker went out to the home, knocked on the door, met by a little grandma that had a Rottweiler that came up to her shoulder, met us at the door, and she said, "Yeah, what do you want?" And the social worker said, "We're here to talk about the truancy of your grandchildren." And she says, "So let me get this straight. You want me to go drag my grandchildren out of bed at 6:30 in the morning and put them on a school bus so they can be assaulted for 45 minutes. And once they get to the racist school, that's her words. She says, and they try to explain what they endured on that 45-minute bus ride, and they're treated bad because they don't like being beat up and assaulted on the bus, and nothing gets done. So I'm standing in there and I said, well, yep, because that's why we were sent out there. Now, the Bombing In on Anishinaabe program, we had resources. I, being a former dean of students, understand individual education plans that weren't being followed. I understand the school was responsible for a safe learning environment. And if we want to improve truancy or make truancy become less of a visible issue, instead of allowing the court system to be the hammer for the schools that don't want to spend resources on figuring out the educational experiences, the Bombing In program started advocating for those children that were being assaulted on the bus. We put a personal letter that was notarized and signed to the principal and the superintendent, saying we expect these children to have a safe ride in the morning. And because they were living with grandma, they fit the Minnesota definition of a second family in a single family dwelling of homelessness. So that opened up new services. We went in, and these children, they all had IEPs. And being somewhat familiar, we started using words like, well, it certainly looks like the school's turning a blind eye to their educational needs, that real legal term of the school wasn't providing those IEP services. And by advocating and telling the school, what have you tried in the past? What services is this homeless family? And they said, oh, they love living with grandma. And I said, that's not my point. My point is they fit the I can't remember the homeless act, Vento something or another, that they fit the state's definition of homeless. I said, you should be sending a van or some other thing out there, to get them. And McKinney Vento, thank you, Christine Hendricks. So the Bombing In Anishinaabe program, with its people that could be advocates, we went in and found the barriers, and there's going to be families that have kids not sleeping at night for various reasons, addiction, those historical, social, and economic conditions I could probably spend way too much time explaining, and then going to school, falling asleep, and having, educators say, what's wrong with you? And if there's a school district in the state of Minnesota that should understand historical, social, and economic conditions, it's Cass Lake being a school. But they're still one of the ones that are still struggling with truancy of people's whose educational experience in 2020, 2021 may, because of ongoing issues outside of school, make the educational experience a very unpleasant one. So I would hope that, I've had an opportunity to take up way too much of your time, but I think it's important to start off on that aspect, to at least think about why truancy gets referred to courts, and kind of let the school districts off the hook. Working in the tribal court, I would ask the judges, ask the schools what plans they came up with first, because they want to inspire, they want to offer hope, but the funding says we got to follow this curriculum, and we can't look into historical, social, and economic conditions that are present in 2021. I want healing for our Indigenous children. And this is the reason that I want healing. As a great-grandfather, as a grandfather, as a father, my children and great-grandchildren, they're gonna want partners one day. It's in our best interest that we bring solutions, to the lack of appropriate educational messages that can inspire people to figure out if historical characteristics are needed in 2021, 2022. Thank you for listening to me. I just squeezed 35 years of understanding into these brief moments you let me speak. Be good.
Well, thank you for sharing with us. I think you hit on a lot of things, that we as truancy prevention folks have worked on or are trying to work on, or things that people that are new to truancy should really be aware of. I mean, if you're running a truancy program in a non-Native community, you aren't having to deal with maybe the same kind of historical trauma, boarding schools have had on our community. So I think that's one thing, is historical trauma you touched on, and I really appreciate you bringing that up. The other thing is barriers, and I think part of that, and anyone's welcome to join the dialogue too, but there are a lot of barriers, sometimes not education related. Like you said, they're social things. Maybe they're like you said, funding barriers from your funding that you're receiving, that's saying, well, you can pay for this, but you can't pay for that. I'd like to know if any other one would like to share why the work you're doing. I know Michael shared in the chat that he does the work to make a difference in the youth's lives, to pave a path for success and bridge the gap between our youth and elders. That's great. Ken shared he's a chief judge for Grand Traverse Band of Ottawa and Chippewa Indians. He believes in justice, and the justice system should be accessible to all to remedy the legal issues that lead to many of our social problems. He's very passionate about truancy because he sees the relationship between education and opportunities and what is available for those in the justice system. He also views truancy as frequently being a symptom of greater issues that may be affecting the child, and the court may be used as a tool to address those issues. Thank you, Ken, for sharing that. Antonia, if you wanted to go to the next slide, please. So today we're really looking at discussing attendance challenges, whether it's be program implementation challenges, challenges you see your families are facing, challenges you see your systems are facing. And then the second objective of the session is for us to really share solutions and strategies. What are we kind of doing to address the challenges that we see everyone's facing? So Antonio, if you could go to the next slide. What I've provided here is just some guiding questions for people to think about as we have this dialogue. Like I said, what kind of systems or programmatic issues have presented obstacles to successfully implementing your program? Maybe what are the biggest challenges your program has faced since the start of COVID-19? What are the biggest challenges some of your families face that you're serving, or the schools that your program works with? And it doesn't have to be challenges that have started since COVID. It could be you've seen these as challenges the entire time you've been implementing. And then what are those challenges around? Are they system challenges, people challenges, technology related, health, something else? So if anyone has anything that they want to share about attendance challenges being faced in your community.
Hi, this is Ken.
Ken?
We've been working the last few months with an internal group as well as a greater external group with the schools involved. Part of what we found in the last few months is that our system response, it has a lot of different components on our side with a lot of different departments. We have education, the prosecutor's office, our social services department, the court, the police department, as well as with the greater system, which includes the schools. We have a 6-county service area, and so we cover all the schools within the 6th county, but there's 2 primary schools that are closely related to the around the location that we have for our most of our buildings. And part of what we had was that different departments would receive information about the children who were truant at different points in time, and that the different departments each have their own criteria for when they can provide services and when they can't. And so our truancy officer being our truancy specialist, not an officer, but a specialist, being grant funded had to either be court ordered or had to be voluntary in order to enter into her program, but she is the primary source of contact with the school. Our social services department can assist anybody that is in the 6th county service area, and then everybody in the justice system side of it, we have to wait until we have jurisdiction, things are referred to us from the school. That has its own process. So what we've been finding through our discussions is that we haven't really fully coordinated who gets what information at what point and whose responsibility is it to move these things forward. We've come up with a potential solution to that. And part of that is to involve the court earlier, where we all understood that, we don't want to criminalize this behavior, because a lot of times it's not even necessarily the child's behavior that is the one we're having issues with. Sometimes it's the parents. A lot of times it's the parents. So we didn't want to do that, and we were avoiding court until the very end. But if we do court at the very beginning when we can, and the court issues the orders, that gets around a lot of our restrictions, especially the funding restrictions from federal grant funds. And so it's been, a process. We're still working through it. But that was one of the biggest system issues that we've had. We've also had issues with COVID, and I think everybody else has. When you have virtual school, it's really hard to do anything truancy related because, it's hard to get them there in person. And now when it's hard to tell if they're really there and participating or not, just leads to problems. And then from my understanding, because I don't work with them individually until they come before the court, but, just getting the families to want to participate before we really do have to get deep into the court process. Because none of us really want that. We just want the kids to school. That's really it. But we've had to have a number of charges against parents lately because it's not the children. For some of them, they're little kids. It's the parents, not getting up, like discussed earlier, they're not fully accepting that responsibility. So we're working through all of those hurdles together, and it's working pretty good so far.
Ken, thank you for sharing that. We had the same issue with the attendance achievement program here at Bosque Yaqui. We served mostly youth that go to schools that are off the reservation. So schools weren't giving us information about kids that were truant. And so the solution for us was they created a truancy code. And then we use that truancy code. We have a school resource officer who works in the law enforcement department, and they'd receive referrals from the school. And then that school resource officer at the tribe would then engage in the services that were needed, that kind of were identified by the family as needing some assistance. I had worked in the prosecutor's office for a time, and that school resource officer would refer information to the prosecutor's office. The prosecutor's office would work with the education department, with our behavioral health services, to be able to engage families, to provide, those extra services. And like you said, there was that barrier of being able to reach families. And sometimes it is hard, like Dale says, we don't want to criminalize families or involve them in the justice system unnecessarily. But it is a solution that you can make workable. I see Sandra had asked if we can share the truancy code. Yeah, I can share Pasquayaquis truancy code. It's also available on their website, but I'll definitely be able to share that with you guys. So does anyone else have attendance challenges that they're kind of facing or seeing? I think one of the other things that Ken had brought up, I think that's an important part of solutions for these attendance challenges, is getting together as a group and being like, what are the barriers? What are the barriers faced by our families? What are the barriers faced by our schools, by the systems? And then there's solutions that we can kind of come up with to be able to resolve those barriers. See, Michael shared that the challenge in our community is a lack of transitional housing that is culturally relevant for youth releasing out of the juvenile justice system. They're oftentimes stuck in the system waiting for placement with a foster family, or don't have anywhere to go but back to a broken home, couch surfing, or on the streets. I think lack of transitional housing, I think that is, and like you said, culturally relevant. Is that a challenge anyone else is facing in their community? I know I've seen that transitional housing for youth, not just out of the justice system, but when they age out of the foster care system. How do we provide those supports? Sandra shared she's here twofold: as a peacemaker in my native community, also as a state employee who works with tribes in Kansas in collaboration of services. We are currently developing crossover youth teams in specific counties with courts, state, county, schools, and youth. Yeah, I know during our last dialogue, one of the important things we had talked about was collaboration and partnership are some of the most important pieces of running a truancy program. YCC, I work mostly with criminal, but in my history reports, I do point out a child not attending school since 4th to 6th grade, and child is now 17 years old. This is becoming an ongoing issue. In my court orders, I make sure a child is attending and continuing schooling to be online or either in presence now that schools are opening. Reason of doing my job is to help in some way to point out these issues. I am trying my best and with possible help with court orders to help move a child to help another child, meaning a parent. Meaning the parents are still in a child mindset. That education is important. It is hard when assisting with a grandparent who is also not tech savvy to help children. I know that was another big thing that was coming up in our last dialogue was to be able to help parents who aren't tech savvy, help these kids who are doing online school. Christy shared that housing is a big problem in Montana. Sandra shared the language used by each program varies and is confusing to families. I definitely can see that. And I think that, to Ken's point, they're all getting together as a group. And one part of that, I think, is having a shared language with how you deal with families. Christy shares lack of communication is also a big issue. I can see that. Antonio, do you want to go to the other slide?
Johanna, I just wanted to share from our last dialogue some of those intersecting issues because we were talking, I heard someone just say earlier, talking about how to serve younger youth who the issue might be related to parent issues, transportation issues, the environmental issues happening in the home versus working with older youth. And so you have those other obstacles that come up. So, what are these older youth involved in? Are there bigger peer impacts that are happening versus, that lack of transportation or the understanding and the need that you need to be just at school every single day? And I know that came up on our last dialogue. So I'm sure that'll be a point of conversation that you could bring up later and see if how other communities are handling. You have limited staff, but you have this wide range of youth and age ranges that you're serving.
Yeah, I know with Pasquayaki, one of the things that the code kind of allows for is for the parent to be charged or for the child to be charged, and with the understanding that them becoming involved in the justice system is one way for them to just connect them to services. Like I said, we are kind of having the same issue Ken's having, where it was a disparate impact that we were able to have until we were able to get the families into the attendance achievement program. And once we brought them into the attendance achievement program, then we had, conversations with them. And a lot of parents at first were pretty angry, but then when we explained, the attendance achievement program was kind of like if you were to get a traffic ticket and then you go to traffic classes and then the ticket gets completely dismissed. So that's the same idea behind the attendance achievement program is, they come in, they get a ticket or a citation, and then the attendance achievement program works with them. And as long as they're complying with the attendance achievement program, then everything doesn't exist anymore. The citation is gone. And I think so to Anna's point about, dealing with the younger versus the older, with Basquiat, a lot of it was, first of all, looking holistically as a family. But when they started to become like middle school and high school age, we saw a lot more that it was child driven or youth driven reasons why they weren't attending school. And so then the staff worked much more closely with the individual child or youth to be able to address the issues that youth had identified as being their own barriers to attending school. And then for the younger ones, it was a lot more working with the parents and educating them about, one, the importance of attendance. We would host parent workshops to kind of give them ideas about how to work with a child if they had kind of identified issues, but also just, like I said, to explain why is it important that they're attending school. And then another part of it was giving them tools to be able to talk about attending school, even if they had not, as parents, maybe they hadn't graduated from high school, and so they didn't feel comfortable talking with their kids about what school was like. Or like Dale had said, there was some historical trauma related to why, they weren't sending their kids to school. So I think that communication is important with families too, is what kind of tools and resources do they need? I see there's some more comments in the chat. Sandra shares the self-worth of the child themselves during the transition. They need to be reminded that they are sacred, wanted, worthy, and heard. I think we all can agree with that. Marlene, I am zooming in from the native village of Port Hayden, PTH, Alaska. Our village is in the Bristol Bay region. She's the wellness coordinator and works closely with the school. Their school population is about 20. Many times teachers are leery to discuss truancy with parents or caretakers who may not see school as a priority. We have about 6 teens who are in high school and have poor attendance. Our resources are limited and many of us wear several hats to be of service to the community. Does anyone have solutions that they've kind of seen that could maybe help with some of the stuff Marlene is seeing? One is teachers being able to communicate. Dale?
One of the things that I always thought was useful is understanding what's meaningful for a student and connecting an educational plan that can, inspire the student to where we don't want to miss tomorrow's class, that there's something that's really, this is where when I was saying earlier, the structure of the school systems now is we need to teach you to read, write, and arithmetic, and there's, in my opinion, there may not be enough that, like everybody on here, there is something about the school that inspired them to want to go every day, to even if it was hard, to have an educational goal of understanding a certain subject, and finding that in the Native youth up there in Alaska, in developing lessons plans around that, where you're valuing them, where you're valuing their culture, and writing part of a curriculum, on math, on social studies, on the particular great things about that community that inspire that educational growth of the brain, in identifying the barriers, and like I mentioned earlier, once you identify the barriers, hopefully, sometimes really caring, for a student to get them there, that doesn't cost anything, and instilling that caring, by wanting to find something interesting that they don't want to miss in those lesson plans or the curriculum, will get them there in the seat the next day, hopefully. But just my thought. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Dale. Anyone else have some solutions or strategies that you've used that you'd like to share with everyone? And if you don't want to unmute, please feel free to put it in the chat. Tricia shares, for our tribal youth program, communication with our elected tribal officials, police department, tribal emergency management, and our local school district helped us to navigate the COVID-19 restrictions to see how we can continue our program delivery. As Blake mentioned earlier, we had to make quick adjustments to best serve our youth and families. We couldn't wait too long to make our changes. Yeah, I think the COVID pandemic has definitely showed how sometimes inflexible our systems might be. Ken, I see you have your hand up. Would you like to share with us?
Yes, thank you. So one thing that we found in our greater discussions with the schools and their representatives is that when we're talking about the generational trauma with the school system, the historic trauma with individuals, that schools really didn't understand that, because the schools are all off reservation. They're not tribal schools. They have a lot of tribal kids there, but just culturally, there's that difference there. And so we had one of our first meetings that we had this year. You know, we went over with the school officials, and they didn't, I still don't think they fully understand what's going on. And since they're the ones that are the first contact with the families, what we're finding is that by the time that we have native cultural components in the school systems, by the time they were speaking with the families, somebody else had already spoken to them with the school, already approached it the way that they always have, and there's still that cultural barrier and difference there, and I'll just be honest, racism in some of the schools, and that just turns the parents off right away. So it's even when our workers are trying to help, they're still trying to just recover from the damage that was done in the first couple of contacts with the school. And so we had just a very, honest and blunt conversation with the schools and said, look, this is what you guys have to accept this. Whether or not you believe that this has truly happened, you have to accept that this is what's going on right now with some of these families, or else you're never going to get past that barrier. And we can help with that, but when you're the first point of contact and you're the ones that have these initial conversations with families, and, if there's damage that's already been done, that just sets everybody else back. So let's all work together and, let us help educate you in the areas that, you might not be familiar with. And then you can educate us on, your system as well. And it went over really well. It seemed a little bit difficult at times, but, I think we're definitely in a better position now that we just, we're approached it from a system perspective than just the parent saying, but how can I trust you? Now, you have the tribal system saying, these are the issues we have to address, because they still continue to this day.
Thank you, Ken. Yeah, I know one of the things that we had done, a lot of the Pasquayaki students attend the Tucson Unified School District, and teachers would have to get professional development every time before school started. And we just asked if we could participate and do some of the professional development for them. So the cultural competency piece of their professional development, we helped to work with the school district to design some of that programming for them. So they are, at least is entering their mind. I know Dale shared in the chat way back in the last century, I was skipping school. My grandma took me into the principal and told them to make me a student tutor, regardless of I was good in math, reading and writing. I became a tutor. Oh, whether you were a good student or not. Yeah. And I think that's one thing too, to Marlena's point is, are there other students you can utilize to be a helpful resource to you? I see someone is asking to speak. Please feel free to unmute yourself. YCCA Hudson.
Trying to unmute. Hold on. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, good morning still. Yeah, it's 11. My name is Agnes Hudson. I'm a youth case coordinator / probation officer. And like I explained, I deal with criminal, but since we've tried to hire a truancy officer ×2, I don't think they had it in the right mindset to understand what truancy is. Our reservation is pretty big. We have about 8 district schools on our reservation. And it seems as I'm watching, the school districts like to point out, well, Native Americans get per captas. If their kids are going to school, let's referral them and get them to court and take those per captas away. So when the truancy officer would approach the families, they would say, well, we're going to counsel, or they would say, oh, they're going to school, they're attending online. But I see that the problem is that our truancy officer was not communicating well with the family. I think they were intimidated by them. So it has come to where my supervisor's asking me to now step in and communicate with family because I do the criminal part. So I feel like this is going to be a new process. And my first step on this situation is now we only distribute to enrolled members. And I don't think we distribute to descendants, but I'm not trying to focus on the funding, the money towards the families, because that helps the kids in a great big deal, but I don't really care where the money goes. It gets to the point where the school talks about, well, they're not spending the money on the kids. I'm like, I don't care about that. I'm just trying to focus on the kids being in school. But do I just work with what's in truancy right now, or do I work with the whole enrolled? You get what I'm saying? Because like I work with the schools and I only work for the nation. I don't work for the Washington State. I'm from Washington. So I don't work with Washington State. I work for our own nation, and we have our own laws. We have our own sovereignty, and our law is that we can take them to our Yakima Nation Tribal Court and take their school per capita's away and punish the parents with the violation of the RYC code. So I'm just trying to figure out what my first step is as this role of a truancy officer. Do I just work with what is truancy right now, or do I, like, I don't even know. I don't know the process. That's what I'm trying to get at.
I think Dale had his hand up. So Dale. did you
Yeah,
wanna-
thanks for indulging me. One of the things that I think is really helpful is, our historical, social, and economic conditions. Unfortunately, Indian gaming isn't designed to solve those. Our historical and social economic conditions, we need help. Education is that help. Now, one of the things that I've found that's really effective with our partners is having a discussion and say, you were cheated out of an education on how the lands and resources exchanged hands from my people's hands to your hands. And when you find out that you were cheated out of this history, we can have a better, if not different, understanding of the educational needs we need to empower our students. So I'm being demonstrative because I think I've been sitting here waiting to be able to say that. So education is the key. But if our dominant culture peers working with us don't understand historical and social, and economic conditions still driving behavior, we need them to understand to help us bring about meaningful change. And even in education, and truancy is just a small aspect of that. Once again, thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you, Dale, for that. And also, I'm sorry, I didn't catch your first name. Abby, I think, Hudson? Agnes. Oh, thank you, Agnes. And one of the things, if there are other people that can share, some solutions, again, I just want to say that the Tribal Youth Resource Center does have technical assistance available. So if there's stuff that we don't address during this dialogue that we're having, that there is some technical assistance available, I can help you out. I'll share my email towards the end of the webinar, or you can get in touch with the Tribal Youth Resource Center.
I just wanted to share kind of in response to the question about, who are we serving and what are we doing and how broad do we make our program? So I think maybe a first consideration is just, the program themselves being empowered to set the criteria for who you're serving. And that's just based on, what are the current resources and services that are available through your program, and who is the best target age range for who you want to serve right now. And I think you can do that by assessing, what is the highest need right now. So what age ranges are you seeing the most issues with? And then starting with those questions. So maybe it's, what's the highest need right now? What is the major priority for this program? And that's based on that sense of urgency. So where are you seeing the highest level of issues that are occurring? And then you can kind of take a step back. So once you have some of those initial services established, start building out the program. And maybe that comes from, beginning those services and building relationships with those teachers and within that school district. And then as you're able to, broadening that target age range, because it is really difficult when you're first starting. You're just trying to get those first services initiated. So trying to think of, this really expansive program, but you don't quite have, your target age range or criteria, the services themselves established. So I think starting small is okay, because you're able to get your program implemented and then growing over time just based on what you're able to integrate from different partnerships or resources there in the community.
Thanks, Anna. I think another thing to keep in mind, going off what Anna was saying, was if there are other programs that are serving other youth, then how can you complement that? Or how could you refer those people to maybe those other services? Because maybe you want to focus maybe on the high school population, and then there could be another program maybe that's doing early education already in your community. So how do you work those two together to complement and not provide overlap or duplicative services at the tribe? And I think another limitation I know that we saw was the tribal code only allowed us to serve those that were on reservation. And so that really limited it. But as the attendance achievement program did a lot of outreach into the community, there were some people who had contacted the program and said, how do I get involved? And they could voluntarily come into the program, but that did, at first provide a limited population that we were able to serve. So that kind of helped us decide who were we serving. So Agnes, I hope some of that helps. If you have any follow-up questions or thoughts, please feel free to unmute yourself and share. Does anyone have any other solutions or strategies that they'd like to share? Or resources you wish you had before the pandemic started? Okay, Antonia, do you want to go to the next slide? So some of the other stuff I was hoping people would want to share is, what are you most proud of about the work that was done during the pandemic, either for yourself or with the families? And what made some of the families that you work with most successful, or what makes your program work most effectively? I see Agnes had shared, it's a huge change from the criminal process, I guess, be open-minded. I think that's a good approach to take. And I think it goes back to some of what Ken is saying too. Who are the other partners that you can work with and have conversations with? I know when we first started to design the attendance achievement program, what we had done was we brought all the partners kind of into the room and said, okay, this is how the current system is set up. And now where are the gaps? Where are the challenges? Where are we kind of losing families? And then how do we design a new system or a new process to be able to catch those families in those gaps? Or how do we address that gap using a process in place? Ken, I see you have your hand up. Would you like to share?
Hi, thank you. So I know there's a few people that are on here that were in the Tribal Probation Academy with me earlier this year. One thing that we learned there that I've been doing, and it's worked really well with youth as well as parents, but especially with parents, is there's motivational interviewing techniques. And in probation, it's basically a way to create a positive relationship between you and a client, and in order to, show them that you can be trusted, that you are, from somewhat of an authoritarian position, but that the ultimate goal is to assist them in getting through this justice system issue. It's usually for probation officers when dealing with probationers, but I found that it works really well whenever you're trying to help somebody change their behavior for the better, so that they're not in the justice system. And so a lot of that is just listening to people, just letting them know that you understand it, repeating things back to them in your own words so that they understand it. And I know Agnes was in the group with me. So that was one thing that's really been helping us so far with youth, and especially with parents, is we hear, you have issues. You're working at the casino until 4 a.m, and then, it's hard for you to get your child up in the morning. But, at the same time, don't you want your child to, have all the opportunities that they could have? And you're the one that can do that. If you need services, let us know so we can help you with that. And just building that kind of relationship with them at all levels. So it's, judge, probation officer, police officer, prosecutor. So if we're all approaching, especially with truancy, approaching it more as a social issue than a criminal issue, it's really more beneficial for the family, and they trust us a little bit more. So I hope that helps you a little bit more, Agnes.
Thanks, Ken. Yeah, I know our TANF program at Pasquayaki also uses motivational interviewing for the families that are in TANF. So I think that's a great tool that you're speaking of. I think one of the things Dale had said earlier was, how do you make that personal connection to that family or to that child? How do you discover what's important to them and then connect that to what the change in behavior that you're trying to make? Rebecca shared that enter each service with assumption that the youth and families care, and go forward with the understanding that there are no lost causes. Rebecca, I think that's great. Thank you for sharing that. Ethelene shared, I agree with Dale's earlier comment about the system and services needing to be healing. Our Indigenous healing life ways should be the foundation. That's great. And Tony, I think we have one more slide, if I remember. Oh, just any other thoughts or comments? Blake shares, our persistence as worker and our program's flexibility is what has been most effective for us and allowed us to continue our programs for our families through the pandemic. I think that's great. Yeah, I was at a conference one time and someone had said, the people that do this kind of social work are the ones that are running towards the fire when everyone else is running away from it. And so I think, like Blake says, that persistence, and that's why I wanted to start with, why do you do the work you do? Because I think you need that reminder when you have hard days or you're working with a family who's really struggling, that reminder of, this is why I do the work I'm doing. Any other thoughts or comments people would like to share? Trisha shares that she is proud of her staff and their try for caring for our youth and their families enough to continue to adjust and be willing to take calculated risks. We only had one program that we weren't able to provide. Otherwise, we were able to offer all of our regular programming. In-person program delivery was frowned upon, yet we were able to push forward and create our own COVID-19 implementation plan that we applied and adapted to each program we offered. Tricia, thank you for sharing. Congratulations on being able to still implement almost all of your programs. That is a great accomplishment. Rebecca, you see how
I just wanted to share what actually it seems like has been echoed throughout this whole presentation is that I think truancy is a symptom. It's not the problem. It's just a symptom of other issues. And if we can enter into it, seeing that and not take getting kids into school as like the ultimate, I don't know how to say it, but like, it's not just getting kids to show up and be at the building. It's so much more than that. It's making sure that they're supported culturally and emotionally and socially, that it's not just about being in the building. It's about more than that.
Rebecca, thank you for sharing. Anyone else have any thoughts or comments that they'd like to leave us with? We'll probably be wrapping up here in the next, I would say 7 minutes or so. I really do appreciate everyone who's shared. I do see another chat. Rosine, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, with the Tuba City Peacemaking Program. We use clan acknowledgement with families to break down barriers and build trust. That's great. I think using the culture of your tribe to build your programs, to build your relationships with families is one thing that you really can use to make a difference in those families' lives. So that's great. Just want to allow anyone else who'd like to share before we kind of allow Anna to make a few announcements. Well, I appreciate everything everyone had to share. I hope everyone learned a little something from each other. And we do have technical assistance available. So if there's something that was touched on here that you'd like a little bit more information on, the whole point of this dialogue was for us to be able to look at designing some resources and tools for those of you that are running truancy prevention programs. So I very much appreciate everyone being able to share today. And I thank you for all of the work you're doing. I know how difficult it is and how difficult it can be. Just know you have a million people behind you rooting you on and wishing you the very best with your work. Thank you for allowing me to be a part of your day today, and I'll turn it back over to Anna.
Thank you, Johanna. And we just want to say thank you for sharing the work that you're doing as well. This session was intended to kind of be the starting point for how do we move forward after this really difficult year. We've had several talking circles with our OJJDP tribal grantees, but we wanted to make the conversation broader and invite other communities to share just about the work that you're doing, the ways that you've been impacted, and hopefully we'll continue these conversations into the fall as we start to see some schools opening up and some students remaining in a virtual learning setting. And so we know that there's going to be future flexibility needed in the coming months. And so thank you to all of you who were online today and shared. And for those of you who want to connect with us later, we will share our contact information. Johanna is a consultant with the Tribal Law and Policy Institute, and I serve as a co-director at the Tribal Youth Resource Center. And so we are available along with the rest of our team who are from communities across the the country to support you with questions or just any issues you might be having in the development or implementation of your program, and not just truancy prevention, but any ways that you're serving your tribal youth, looking at the different issues that might be coming up for you as you've weathered the pandemic. And so we're here to support. We're really happy that we're able to serve as a cooperative partner with OJJDP. And so just know that we're here to support in whatever way that we can. I'm going to put the evaluation link in the chat. Please fill that out. We would like your feedback on today's session because it can help us inform the next session that we do and also future trainings. And we know that being in a virtual environment can be difficult. And so some people may not be comfortable sharing online. And so again, please feel free to contact us. We'd love to connect with you and talk about anything that's come up for you as part of this conversation or anything that's been on your mind related to your youth serving programs. I also wanted to invite you, we do have a YouTube channel and that has our archive trainings on it. And so we have a 3-part learning series that we did last year specifically on truancy prevention. And we have some other resources and tools that were part of those trainings. And so I would invite you to go back and look at those. I will also place that in the chat. And then we are really excited that we have a forthcoming publication that is specific to truancy prevention, program development in tribal communities. When you look at the resources that are out there related to truancy prevention, those that are tribal specific are really limited. And so we've started with this very first publication and we look forward to expanding that in the future because we see just a lot of different issues coming up, many of those that were raised on today's session. So those are all of my announcements. I really do thank all of you for the work that you're doing in your community. I appreciate each one of you that shared today and each one of you that didn't want to share today. I just thank you for your presence and your willingness to be a part of this session today. And so please share this. We're going to record this session. Share this with anyone that you're working with that you think might be interested, and please let them know that we're here to support as part of the Tribal Youth Resource Center. You can go to the next slide, Antonia. I think that's just our closing information. And I'm going to put my email in the chat for you all. And we hope that you all have a great rest of your day and a good rest of your week. Stay well.